They left their baby alone for 14 days, and when he was found, his diaper was full of maggots. The tragic case of 4-month-old Sterling Cohen, trigger warning. Sterling was born May 1st, 2017 to his mother Cheyenne and his father Zachary. They had a long history of drug abuse, and Sterling even tested positive for drugs when he was born, but for whatever reason, CPS allowed them to keep the baby and their 2-year-old daughter named Nala. On August 30th, 2017, Zachary called 911 and told dispatch that he had found his 4-month-old baby dead and said that he believed he died of SIDS, but when first responders arrived, they noticed Zachary was acting really weird. Zachary was very hesitant and wouldn't let them go in the house until one EMT started yelling at him, "Take me to the baby right now," and that was when Zachary finally let them in the house. When Zachary opened that bedroom door, the first thing they noticed was the odor. The smell of urine and feces would take your breath. They also noticed the bedroom was stagnant hot, like humid, and it was pitch black dark because they had a blanket covering the window, and when Zachary cut on the light, they sent a baby swing pushed up against the wall facing the wall. The first responder walked over and attempted to pick Sterling up out of the baby seat, but when she did, a swarm of bugs came flying out of his clothes, and he was cold and stiff, so she sat him back down in the swing and waited for the police. Now, they could tell Sterling had been dead for some time, and because they didn't want to disrupt any possible evidence, they sent the whole baby swing with Sterling inside over to the medical examiner's office. Cheyenne said that she last seen Sterling earlier that morning when she fed him a bottle of milk and he was just fine. Zachary claimed he last seen Sterling the night before when he went in that room to play with him, and that Sterling had even reached up to grab his finger, and everything seemed okay. The police did not arrest them because they wanted to gather more evidence and wait for the autopsy that was being conducted the next day. Trigger warning, we're going to talk about Sterling's autopsy results, and they are very disturbing. When the medical examiner removed his diaper, he found thousands of flies and maggots that were in various stages of their life cycle that had made their way up into his body. Now, there were several different generations of flies in his diaper, where an adult fly had flown in, laid an egg, the egg had hatched, and then became an adult and then died again. As horrific as it sounds, the medical examiner was able to use the fly's life cycle to determine just how long Sterling was left in that swing, and he figured it was around 14 days or more. Sterling was left in that swing for so long that when he used the bathroom, there was nowhere for it to go, so his feces went back up inside of him, causing a very serious E. coli infection, and because that was not treated, the infection made its way into his bloodstream and poisoned him. This diaper rash was so severe that the diaper, bugs, and feces embedded itself into his skin, becoming raw, and he said that Sterling was alive when this started, so he would have felt the burning pain from the rash, along with the bugs crawling all over him and laying eggs in him. Sterling was so emaciated, he weighed less than 5 pounds at 4 months old. The medical examiner did not find any milk or cereal in his stomach and determined he was malnourished and dehydrated because he had not been fed in weeks. There was no way that Cheyenne had given him a bottle of milk that morning, or Zachary had played with him the night before, because Sterling had been dead for days. They ruled his death as starvation, dehydration, and E. coli infection. This baby suffered a lot. CPS placed their daughter in foster care, but they were still allowed visits, and the public was outraged that no arrests were made. Months would go by, and during that time, they were living their best life. They were all over social media posting memes and jokes and showing off their new matching tattoos. And no, their tattoos were not in honor of Sterling. They barely spoke of him unless they were trying to gain sympathy while still claiming he died of SIDS. They posted a lot about how unfair it was that CPS had put their daughter in foster care because they were great parents now that they were sober, which was a damn lie. But finally, in February of 2019, Zachary and Cheyenne were arrested for first-degree murder and child endangerment, and they both pled not guilty and wanted to go to trial. And of course, they immediately turned on each other, as these monsters typically do. Zachary said this was Cheyenne's fault because he worked full-time and was barely there, and that he didn't know Sterling was being neglected because when he went in that room, Sterling was fine. The prosecutor said there was no way that Zachary just didn't notice what was going on because he participated in it. Zachary claimed he worked anywhere from 50 to 70 hours a week, but the prosecutor was able to prove that was another lie. The prosecution got his timesheet from his job, and they proved that some weeks he didn't even work 24 hours. So that meant a majority of these weeks before Sterling's death, Zachary was at home and chose not to take care of Sterling. The prosecutor asked Zach, "Why didn't you change Sterling's diapers the way you changed Nala's?" And Zachary claimed because he had a weak stomach and couldn't stand the smell of poop, and that Sterling always had diarrhea and that he just couldn't take it. But he changed his daughter's diapers. That makes no sense. And Zachary drove a shit truck for a living, like for hog farms and chicken farms. He smelled shit on a regular basis, so the prosecutor knew something wasn't adding up here and Zachary was still lying. Cheyenne's defense was she had postpartum depression and was so depressed she couldn't even get out of bed, and that she just could not change his diaper, she could not feed him, she couldn't bear to wash him because she just didn't have the energy. But the prosecution would quickly call her out on that claim. The prosecution showed that their 2-year-old daughter Nala was very healthy. She had been fed, changed, clothed, they took her to the park, they took took her out to eat. They spent a lot of time with Nala. When Zachary wasn't there, Cheyenne was getting up out of bed to take care of Nala and herself, and there was proof of it on social media and witnesses who seen them. The prosecution could not figure out the motive here. They took such great care of Nala and themselves, even while using drugs, so why did they neglect Sterling to death? After speaking with some of their friends, authorities learned that Zach and Cheyenne did not think that Sterling was Zachary's biological child because his skin was so much lighter, so the prosecution felt like that was their whole motive. They were punishing Sterling for Cheyenne's alleged cheating, but it turns out Sterling was Zachary's son. So after they brought Sterling home, the pair put a baby swing in the bedroom next door to theirs, they covered the window with a blanket, cranked the heat up, and that bedroom would become Sterling's new dungeon, and that's where he spent a majority of his days. And for the first couple of months, they would at least give him a bottle and change his diaper occasionally, but by the time he was 3 months old, they locked him in that bedroom like a prisoner and just pretended like he wasn't there. That poor baby had to sit in that hot, stagnant, bug-infested, pitch-black dark room all alone for weeks, and we all know that baby cried out a lot, and those bastards sat there and ignored him until he finally died. The court knew this was intentional. They had put sticky fly traps in that room in an attempt to deal with the bugs because they didn't want to change or wash him. They had even turned his baby swing facing the wall so they wouldn't have to look at him when they entered that room. They had even put air fresheners all over that room and a stack of blankets on top of him to avoid that horrid smell because they knew they were neglecting him. Zachary's brother had even begged them to please give him custody of baby Sterling, but they refused because Cheyenne said she didn't want someone else raising her baby. There were plenty of people who would have taken baby Sterling. They could have called the police, CPS, friends, or family, anyone, but they chose not to. So Zachary and Cheyenne were both found guilty of murder and child endangerment, and they were both sentenced to life in prison. Let's take a moment to remember 4-month-old baby Sterling. Not much was known about Sterling because he was only a 4-month-old baby who had been trapped in this room for a majority of his life, so I want to say a few nice things about him that I believe to be true. I think Sterling was a sweet, wonderful, beautiful baby who loved to be held and cuddled. I can just imagine how it felt picking him up and holding him and him just nuzzling his head into your chest and just cozying up. I think Sterling would have grown up to be a wonderful son, brother, and friend had he been given the chance.